Well, today we're talking about divinity indwelling. However, there have been times, in fact, there have been many times, when I've stated that we are all divine beings, born of spirit, so our essential nature must be spiritual. When there have been objections raised from those not familiar with unity or the New Thought teachings, who do you think you are, putting yourself on the same level as God? This is blasphemy. How can you say such a thing? Yes, people have actually said that to me. And I have explained that the old teachings that we are all sinners, born in iniquity and needing to be saved, have long since gone. They were just man's opinions. They were not God's truth. Mankind's consciousness has now ascended to a greater understanding of the teachings of Jesus, who said, "That which is born of spirit is spirit." In fact, he went even further to declare in the Gospel of John, "Is it not written in your law? I said, ye are gods," which he had indeed learnt from the Jewish law in the Psalm 82, which says, "I have said, ye are gods, and all of you are children of the Most High." So Jesus made it very clear that we are all individualised expressions of God, born of spirit and containing all the gifts of spirit at the very core of our being, just waiting to be recognised and expressed. And in Genesis we read, "So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, and male and female created he them." So I'm convinced we are all divine beings. We each contain the divine inherencies, all the inherencies of love, wisdom, knowledge, understanding, all the joy and power of life, which is so freely given to us. You know, I used to know a South American lady who, instead of saying, "Oh my goodness," always said, "Oh my godness." And I always thought, oh, how apt, for we are each and every one of us godness in expression. But sometimes it takes us many years of living on this planet before we realise the truth of our own being. We live with all our human faults and failings until we learn to turn inward in prayer and meditation. And as we enter our prayer life, then we begin to have all the spiritual insights to bring into our awareness our own personal godness and the godness of others. We find our own divinity. And what a joyful awareness that is. Oh, it's just wonderful. I was brought up to believe that little girls should be seen but not heard. And because my head was always glued to the radio to pick up the words of the popular songs of the day, my mother was heard to declare on several occasions, "Oh, that girl will never amount to anything." So I always had the feeling of being less than. I was afraid of authority and an absolutely driven people pleaser. I twisted myself into knots trying to please everyone, and I agreed with everyone, and I did not have one shred of self-respect. The idea of self-esteem was completely unknown to me. What a relief it was when I came to the understanding of my own divinity. How wonderful to know that a creation indicates a creator, and being born of that creator, I must have inherited the divine qualities, the divine gifts, and they were all indwelling, just as the divine presence of God is indwelling me and everyone else on the planet. So at last I found that I was not less than. I found I'm equal to everyone contained in this vast wholeness of being. What a joyful discovery that was for me, because then I began realising the gifts of spirit which had been there indwelling all the time. Suddenly I found I could do new things, hold down jobs, achieve positive outcomes that I had previously never imagined I could do. I realised I was not alone. God's divine presence dwelt in my very own soul. God's divine presence walked with me every step of the way. God's divine presence spoke through the still, small voice, so that I was spirit-led into my good. And as I dropped all fear, all anxiety, I relaxed into the strength of my own divinity. So I lived with joy, the joy of knowing I was one with my Creator, one with all creatures, one with every person on the planet. So it matters not what happens to us when we have this realisation of oneness. We have all the power of our own divinity, all the power of God's indwelling presence, sustaining us through every moment of our spiritual journey throughout our God-ordained lives. How strengthening is that knowledge? It's just the most wonderful feeling. You know, St. Paul spoke many times about the gifts of spirit. He told the Corinthians, there are varieties of gifts, but the same Spirit. He goes on to list wisdom, faith, healing, the working of miracles, and many others. And he also says, every man hath his proper gift of God, one after this manner, and another after that manner. And in writing to Timothy, he reminds him to not neglect that gift that is in you. Stir up the gift of God which is within you. So there are many gifts of God lying latent in each one of us. What is your gift? Have you found it yet? The beauty of it is that once we've found one gift and begin to share it with the world, we find we have many more gifts to share because God's gifts are infinite. The more we use, the more we find. God's grace is never ending, so take St. Paul's advice and stir up the gifts of God within you. You know, along with the gifts, we also find our God-ordained purpose. I'm always amazed that so many people say to me, oh, if I only knew my purpose in life. How can I find my purpose? How do I know there's even a purpose in life? And so it goes on and on and on. And I reply, your purpose in life is exactly what you are doing now if you are finding joy in what you are doing. Our deepest desire is to do something that can benefit ourselves and others, something that we can only bring about life-affirming good to all concerned. These are the indicators of our God-given purpose, and these will fill you with joy. It won't feel like work. It will just be a joy to do. Are you in a job you don't like? Just in it for the money to keep you afloat, to keep on doing the same old job day after day? Are you in a relationship which drains your energy and gives you no joy? Oh dear. Are you putting up with situations that fill you with anxiety and leave you with confusion about your future? Then you're not fulfilling God's purpose for you. Find something that you just love doing. Explore your talents from childhood. Do that which is your deepest yearning. Don't ignore that yearning for 1 minute. Just do it, and you will live with joy. I know this is true, because I proved it for myself many, many years ago. Coming from a seafaring family, I longed to go to sea. Everyone laughed at me and said, oh, but you're a girl. You can't go to sea. But I insisted, yes, I am going to sea. And after a series of miracles, much too long to explain here, I did go to sea way back in the 1960s, and I loved it. working as a stewardess on Swedish cargo ships. On the very first day, as the ship cleared the harbour, I felt the sudden roll of the deeper waters of the open sea. Oh, and I felt such a surge of happiness. I knew I was not doing what I wanted to do. I was doing what I had to do. I was obeying my inner yearning. And people had said to me, "Oh, you're so lucky to be going on Swedish ships because they're so clean." Little did I know that I was the one that would be doing the cleaning. So I found the life very hard at times, lots of scrubbing and cleaning and serving meals on ships that rocked and rolled through raging storms and then safely sailed on beautiful, calm waters. It's very strange, as I'm not a brave person. In fact, I'm rather squeamish when it comes to it. And I'm very careful about staying out of danger. Yet when the storms raged, I hung on to the ship's rail and gloried in the wind and the water, all pouring around me. I found it exhilarating to be a part of the elements and gave myself completely to the experience. Oh, it was great joy. I don't think I could do that now. Some ships had no air conditioning, and it was unbearable sailing through the tropics, so hot that we couldn't sleep down below. Some of us just had to sleep out on the deck, under the stars. The tropical night sky above the Pacific Ocean, with an endless vista of twinkling stars, was a most glorious sight to see. The memory of it is still very strong, and I can still see the glory of it in my mind. A wonderful sight, and a reminder of the wondrous power of God's amazing universe. I think that's why I love the hymn, "How Great Thou Art." Though I sometimes found the work unrewarding, I enjoyed learning about other cultures around the world, seeing beautiful sights in foreign lands, and sometimes seeing terrible poverty, but always meeting wonderful, friendly people in each and every port. Some who communicated with me very well, even though sometimes we didn't even speak the same language. People the world over are wonderful, and I just loved my 6 years at sea. I knew I was doing what I was born to do, so I lived with joy. So turn inward, go into the silence, and listen, just listen, until you hear the promptings of Spirit leading you into your own God-ordained path. St. Paul also told the Corinthians to strive for the greater gifts. So, what are the greater gifts? These, of course, are the spiritual gifts waiting patiently inside us until we develop our awareness of the spiritual life. As we become aware of our own inner divinity and let it express through us, then we are lifted up and lifted out of all our doubts and all our fears. And we find that our consciousness is entirely changed, and we are lifted into a higher plane of spiritual power, the inner power for all good. We embrace all that is life-affirming, and as we see the hand of God working in our life situations, so our faith is built up and it's strengthened. We enter into a personal relationship with God, for God has a unique personalness to each one of us. As we enter into this right relationship, we see divine intelligence changing every situation in our lives for the better. Everything, every situation in our lives falls into its perfect place. It becomes a joyful adventure, full of happy happenstances. Yes, there are times when things go wrong, but trusting in Spirit and leaning on its guidance, we find that every seeming wrongness turns out to be a disguised rightness that lifts us up to a higher plane of consciousness than before. It becomes a blessing in disguise. I would like a dollar, every time someone has said to me, "Oh, that was really hard going. But I'm glad I did it, because I'm a much better person than before." Yes, everything that happens to us, seemingly good or bad, is actually pressing us forward and upward into God's all good. As we continue in our prayer life, we accept all the gifts of Spirit as they come to our recognition. St. Paul listed many more gifts for the Galatians. He said the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, and temperance. And against such there is no law. And the most powerful of all these gifts is love. It is the strongest power in the universe. It is the holy glue that holds us all together into the wholeness of being. I'm not talking of a romantic love here. I'm talking of the universal love that sees us all living in loving oneness, a God-ordained oneness, which gives us a love of nature, a love of all creatures, and a love of all the people who appear in our lives. Incidentally, I love you all here. To live with love is to fully accept all the gifts of Spirit and express them as we build the kind of character that God wills us to have. And God wills only good for us. So turn inward, accept your own divinity, and give thanks for it's leading you to your own good and the good of the whole world. Thank you. Thank you, Bill. I'm just being